Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Journey to Multifamily Millions. I'm your host, founder, and CEO of ZANA Investments, Tim Little. And on today's show, we have with us John Pearl. John is a commercial real estate investor and co-founder of Freedom Investor with experience both as a passive investor and general partner on deals. He is a prior service Army infantry officer and now works as a nuclear security specialist at a plant which is set to shut down in 2025. His mission is to replace his W-2 income with real estate investment before the plant shuts down. He lives with his wife and 3 young children in sunny California. John, you have a lot going on. Thanks for taking the time to come on to the show.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me here, Tim. Excited to chat.
Yeah, so I gave everyone a high-level overview of your background, but on this show, we really like to get down to the details on how you got started on your journey to multifamily millions. So please tell us a little bit more about yourself and what brought you into the multifamily space.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Happy to do that. So my journey, I'd like to give a high-level background, kind of where I started. So growing up, I came from, I would consider it upper middle class. My dad was a lawyer, mom was a nurse. Money was never an issue, but it was also never really talked about. My parents made good money, but they worked for a long time and they were gone a lot. At least my dad was gone a lot. And I never wanted that to be the case once I reached adulthood and had kids. So that was a big lesson that came into play later on in life. But moving forward, I got to college, was never a great student in the classroom, made some dumb money decisions. I was at the University of Tennessee, also did Army ROTC in college, which then I commissioned into the Army infantry and ended up going the National Guard route. But once I graduated college, I did not get a scholarship from ROTC, and I had a lot of student loan debt that I had to start paying off once I graduated. And the catch there was that I could not find a job here where I live on the Central Coast of California. I met my wife in Tennessee. She got a job here in California. That's what brought us to this area. And it was hard to find a job. I was unemployed for about a year. And quite frankly, it was a miserable time in my life. I had debt collectors calling me every day. I couldn't pay my debts. I was living off of my then girlfriend, my sugar mom, now wife. And once I did finally get my job at the nuclear power plant where I work at now, I started aggressively paying off those debts. I worked with my brother, who's a financial advisor. We created a plan, and I just lived a very Spartan lifestyle and pretty much put everything I could towards paying off my debt. And over the course of about 2 years, I was able to do that successfully. I was putting about $2,000, $2,500 a month just to pay off these loans. And once I did that, then I had kind of reached homeostasis. I wasn't in debt, but I didn't have anything built up yet. So now the mission changed to building up the net worth and building up my investments. And the only way at the time that I knew how to do that was through the 401k offered through my company. So I started maxing that out. With the additional money I had on top of that, I put that with my brother into a Roth IRA, which was good. Those aren't bad plans. It's better than doing nothing. But a couple years down the road, I ultimately started getting interested in real estate investing. And I forget what it was. I happened upon BiggerPockets. I'm sure you've heard many people, that's a lot of folks' origin story in real estate investing. They find BiggerPockets, start reading the blogs, start listening to the podcast, get the books, and so on. So that was me. And I had a significant chunk of money saved up in my 401k. So I thought, okay, I'll just take some money out of there and invest it into real estate, right? Shouldn't be a problem. But that's not the case. Anybody who's got a 401k or is familiar with 401ks knows that it doesn't work quite like that. There are ways to do it. You can take a loan out for yourself or take a penalty and have to pay taxes on it. But I didn't end up wanting to do that. So I ended up shifting my allocation from my 401k to strictly save up to store money to invest in real estate at a point down the road. All the while I am learning about the different niches in real estate investing. And I found the BRRRR method, which is what I really wanted to get into. And I was looking for properties in Knoxville, Tennessee, which is where I went to school, market I was familiar with, great market for investments. And at some point throughout that time, I started hearing more about multifamily investing, and I started noticing a trend that all of these single family investors, or a lot of single family investors, eventually end up switching over. They kind of reach a critical point in their journey where it just becomes too much to handle, and they end up going into the multifamily space. So I figured, okay, all these people are doing that. Maybe I'll just bypass the single family space altogether. And so I started researching multifamily. This is probably around 2018, 2019. And at that point, you research multifamily long enough, then you start hearing about syndication. And I became fascinated with that concept. You can, for those that may not be as familiar, high level syndication, the pooling of resources together, a group of people pooling their money together to purchase a larger, likely more efficient asset. So that idea fascinated me. I could achieve all these same benefits of owning a multifamily property, but I'm not going to be the one making the decisions. I can learn from the folks who know what they're doing. So that's ultimately what I wanted to get into first, being a passive investor, a limited partner. And so I started attending some events. I went to an event in Dallas in the fall of 2019, built up a relationship with a gentleman who was also in the military, and we kind of built some rapport. I stayed in touch with him. We went to another event soon after that, stayed in touch. At this point, I was wanting to invest with him, and I met some other people who had participated in some of his deals in the past, heard nothing but good things. A deal came out that I liked, and I had the capital to deploy into the deal at this point. And so I ended up going with it. It was a 200 unit Class B just outside of Dallas. The deal closed in April of 2020. If you remember what was going on then, that's right when COVID was hitting. So I thought I had made the worst decision of my life. You hear all the stories about all the successful investors, entrepreneurs. They have that one moment in life where it's just a huge failure. They lose all their money and they have to start from scratch. I thought that was going to be me. Ultimately, that wasn't the case, and it solidified my belief in multifamily real estate. It thrived through COVID. There's a number of factors with that. It wasn't without its issues, but that process, the learning that I was able to do in that process, it forced me to realize that I think I could do this too on the active side. So I joined a coaching program, and then I started trying to take down deals on my own. I met my current partner, Daniel, in that program, and we tried to take down a deal in Iowa ourselves. That ended up being a failed syndication, which we can get into a little bit more if you'd like, but that didn't work out. A lot of lessons learned throughout that process, and kind of showed me that there are certain areas of the business that I like more than others. And then ultimately was able to get into a deal in Mobile, Alabama through relationships and partnerships. And I've got what I like to consider an entry level co-GP. I help out with some of the asset management. I'm on the property manager calls, and I'm learning from an experienced team as we go. So that's kind of where I am today. Most recently, my partner and I, Daniel, we started a fund, the Freedom Investor Fund. And that was the result of, out of all these different experiences, I learned that I'd like to just focus on the capital raising and educational piece of the business right now. And the only way you can do that legally without participating in other aspects of the deal is by having a fund. So that's where I'm at today.
Woo! Okay. Yeah. So obviously a lot to unpack there. And so I'm going to back it up a little bit. And I think this is probably one of the reasons why you and I get along so well, is because we have so much in common when it comes to our background and how we got into this business. It's just kind of like parallel courses. There are some deviations here and there, but like you, coming out of grad school, I had a ton of student debt. I'd say it was around 130. And to me, that felt oppressive. Living in a very expensive place like Washington, D.C., the pay is a little better. But like you, I was living below my means so that I could aggressively pay off those school loans. I was probably paying about $1,500 a month just to the loans. For some people, that is a mortgage in and of itself. So really wanted to pay those down as quickly as I could, because I wasn't going to sit there and just hope that in 10 years they'll go away. Like, hope is not a method as far as I'm concerned. And I really wanted to get rid of those loans so that I felt like I had permission to start saving and to start investing. Because when you have all that piled on you, like I said, it's almost like this mental block against, well, I can't really save. Well, I can't really invest because I have all these loans. And I think there's some value as long as you can pay your loans. There's value in still saving, in still investing, because those things can help you get out of that debt faster. And I think I realized that, I wouldn't say too late. I did get lucky with the DC housing market with my personal residence and was able to make, I think, about 85,000 free and clear when we sold our house there. And I immediately turned around and wrote a check for $83,000, which was the remaining balance of my school loans. That was a really hard thing to do, but the mental good that it did for me and the place that it put me psychologically afterwards was well worth it, even though, it was hard to sign my name on that check. And then, like the whole bigger pockets, all that thing. I think I was probably a couple of years prior to you, but same kind of trajectory. I think what was interesting about your story, though, is you kind of leaped over a couple of steps that some folks make, right? A lot of folks take the single family method, then they reach a point where they can't really scale anymore. So then they move up to small multifamily. And then they're like, hey, there's this commercial multifamily syndication thing out there. Now I should move on to that. You just kind of stepped over both of those and went directly to the passively investing in syndication deals. So bravo on cheating the game there and getting ahead. I started off with a duplex before I found syndications and did my first passive investment in like 2017. And like you, I was like, hey, this one makes a lot of sense, but two, I think I could do this. And so that's when I started pursuing it as well. I also thought it was funny that you thought you could just take money out of your 401k. That's just silly.
That was a tough lesson to learn. Yeah. Why would I have control over my money? Yeah. That was one of the things that left a really bad taste in my mouth.
Yeah, sorry. And then because I just had a monthly webinar, was it like a week ago, on self-directed retirement accounts. And like you said, there are ways that you can do it. It's just most people do not know about it. Once you discover it, it's pretty amazing. And I think that's our responsibility too, is to show people, hey, you do have more money available to you than you probably think you do. Because they have orphan 401ks, or maybe they're eligible for solo 401k, all this stuff out there that the funds that are sitting there, and they could be sizable amounts that they think they can't touch, but they may be able to if they put it in the right structure. And then the other thing I just wanted to hit on, no, that was really it. So again, just impressed that you were able to skip most of those steps, get ahead of the rest of us. When you first did that syndication deal, I certainly understand your apprehension coming into 2020. Did that deal work out as advertised?
So yeah, that deal is actually in escrow right now. It's being sold at the moment, and it is set to sell. It's not initial or original projections, but it is doing a lot better than I expected. So it's going to end up being a 1.6 equity multiple. And, it was projected at a 1.9. So, hey, I'll tell you what, I'm still happy with that compared to what my 401k has been doing for the past year and a half or so. And ultimately it ended up being a good thing. And more importantly, I've just learned a ton. The GP team that I'm working with, or that purchased the deal that we're partnering with, they've been had extremely good communications, which anybody listening, that is definitely something that you want to make sure is going to happen if you're getting into a deal. The communications have been phenomenal, and I've learned a ton throughout the process. So that's more important to me than the money side of it.
Yeah, and that's one thing I tell people too. When I did my first passive investment, I had recently just gone to my first multifamily conference. And of course, they were trying to pitch me on their 20, 30, $40,000 program to learn how to do it. But I was about to go on a deployment myself, and I knew I wouldn't be able to take advantage of it, right? Like to put in the time to actually focus on it. So instead, I was like, well, why don't I find a syndicator, a sponsor that I trust, and invest this little money I do have saved up and learn the process by doing, really understand the passive investors side of things before I move to the other side and become that general partner. That way I understand what their concerns are, what questions they should be asking, and really the mindset piece. And so what I tell folks is basically I was earning while I learn. Instead of paying money for a program to learn, I provided investment funds and was getting paid to learn while I was going through that investment. So I definitely think that's a smart way to go for anybody who's considering this.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's been a great process. It's definitely a great way to get started.
Yep. And so, as we talked about, you have a military background like I do. And so, when I talk to military folks, I'm always curious to hear their experiences, compared to mine. And I want to know what you think. Do you think that military experience has helped you or perhaps even hindered you on this entrepreneurial journey?
Well, it's definitely helped me 100%. Just because the person I was before I became associated with the military was a completely different person. It was somebody who lacked confidence. I didn't feel that I didn't have the confidence in myself to go out and get the job done. And when I got to college, I ultimately, so my dad's deal for I have an older brother too. His deal for us was that we had to do our OTC for a year, just participate, just to have a little structure, and then he would pay for our college. So I ended up doing it for a year and I ended up really liking it. I was doing PT 5 days a week, waking up early. It kept me some of the times it kept me from being out late and partying. I can't by any means say that it kept me out all the time, but the people that I was surrounded by, the mentors that I had, they were just phenomenal people. And I hadn't been around people like that up to that point in my life. The mentors that I had were coming in and out of combat tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, and they weren't going to accept anything less than the best from me. And I had never really experienced that before. And it showed me what I was capable of doing if I put my mind to something. And that story kind of goes on throughout my whole time in the military. I mentioned I ended up going into the National Guard, and I never did active duty. So I was never that full time Army officer, which I think is ultimately a good thing for me, knowing my personality. But there were a number of number of big experiences that I had where either I failed the first time and then I ended up going back and changing my strategy for training, some of the schools that I ended up going to. And then ultimately I was successful. And a lot of those lessons that I learned about myself, whether it was physical training, if I'm training to go to a school where I have to work, I'm working from 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. and then I'm training afterwards for this train up program. And then those lessons I learned about myself physically and those same concepts, since I've gotten out of the Army, I've kind of learned to apply that same work ethic, but more on the mental side, and apply some of that stuff that I learned into what I'm doing now with the work ethic, where doing whatever it takes to get the job done, waking up early. If there's something to be done, get it done when you say you're going to get it done, keeping my word, having the confidence that I can achieve whatever I set out to achieve. It's been huge. I didn't have that before the military, and it's been completely transformational for me.
Yeah, that's great. I think some of the things that I heard there that I can certainly identify with is just the resiliency from the mindset aspect, and then commitment. Doing what you said you were going to do, and then integrity, right? Which is crucial in this business. I mean, you talked about the communication and how vital that is to what we do, because if investors don't hear anything, no news is bad news as far as I'm concerned. And even when you have bad news, you need to give it to them, because bad news doesn't get better with time. But if they know that you're working on the problem, then that instills a certain level of confidence rather than, quiet, which then your mind just starts racing into how bad things really are. What are they actually doing? Is my money going to disappear? So that the sooner you can give people the information that they're looking for, and every investor is different, right? Like some want to hear from you all the time. Some may be fine just getting that monthly update, and that's all right. But I think, like you said, communication is crucial in this business, especially in times like this where things are changing so quickly, whether it's interest rates, the economy. everything is going a little haywire compared to where it was during the boom times prior to 2020. So I think that's crucial. And then the other piece, for me at least, is the problem solving aspect and planning, right? Those are two things as an Army officer that I think I've gotten in spades from the military is learning how to plan something, how to implement it, and then adjusting to any problems that arise, which, is readily transferable to what we do. Because what are we doing? We're buying a business and then we're implementing a business plan, right? So if you're not able to do that, then you're not going to be successful in this business. And I think we've already shown that we can do that in other capacities. So it's just a natural transfer into what we do as syndicators, sponsors, whatever you want to call us.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
So you talked a little bit about failure, and I think that we tend to learn more from failure than we do success. So, and you haven't talked about all the deals that you've done, but let's talk about some of the failures you might have had. And I'm using that word broadly, right? It doesn't mean you lost everyone's money or you lost your own money, but things don't necessarily turn out the way they were supposed to. So, talk to me about times when you face some challenges and how you dealt with that.
Yeah. So I mentioned in my intro that my partner and I, we tried to take down a deal in Iowa. And my partner's from the Midwest, so he's familiar with that market, and that's why we were searching in that area. But it was a 72 unit C plus property. It was in a good area of Cedar Rapids. It was in a good area, close to a lot of amenities or close to a lot of services that you would want to see in a C class property. And we loved the deal. So we put it under contract. We had a very buyer friendly contract, which ultimately saved our behinds in the long run throughout this deal. But when we went out to the property to visit it and walk the units, and we had already built out our team in the area, we had the contractors walking it with us. We had a property management team that we had gone through the interview process. They were walking it with us, very familiar with the local market. So that was one thing that we did well in that deal. And what we learned throughout that process was that the initial numbers that we were given from the sellers were not actually making sense once we got down into the weeds, and it didn't turn out to be true in a lot of cases. Once we got our hands on the rent rolls and we're comparing them to the actual leases that were signed, there was a lot of discrepancy and a lot of questions that could not be answered by the owners. In addition to that, a lot of the projections that were provided to us, or the costs that it was going to take to implement our business plan, were not what we had originally thought they would be. And that's on us for not realizing that ahead of time. That's where it becomes really important to be super familiar with a specific market that you're looking to invest in. So that was a rookie mistake on us. Another rookie mistake was that we did not calculate the taxes correctly. And then we figured out how to do that after we had gotten the property under contract. So there were a number of issues that surfaced after we put the property under contract, and ultimately we could not come to an agreement with the sellers to get to a point that made sense for both of us, for both parties. And so we had to respectfully back out of the deal. And going back to that very friendly, buyer friendly purchase agreement that we had put in place, it came back to be huge because we almost lost our hard money, but because of the contract that we had put in place, we were able to get it back. And so we were going back and forth with the sellers for a long time on that. And it was a very nerve-wracking process. It was right around the time, in fact, I was in the hospital with our third baby was being born, and we were figuring out whether or not this thing was going to actually go through. So that was a very interesting time, but ultimately it was a huge learning process. And while it was difficult to not go through, I think it's sometimes you let the emotions get the best of you. And, we put this deal under contract. We were finally going to be lead GPs on a deal and have our own deal and bring capital into it and be well on our way to multifamily millions, right? But we had to make this decision based on the facts, and ultimately that was the right decision. So we escaped a bad deal, and ultimately it's better to not go forward with a bad deal than to get caught up in it. So It was a great learning process. We did lose some money just on the flights and hiring or taking people out to lunches and meeting people, but ultimately nothing compared to the amount of money that we would have lost if we had put that thing under, if we had gone forward with the sale, with the purchase. So great learning experience.
Yeah, and I mean, so yeah, you lost some money on the due diligence expenses, essentially, it sounds like. So how much would you have lost?
I don't even remember at this point, but we were just so far off on the numbers that it wasn't even a thing. It was more so an argument of whether we were not going to get our hard money back. So that was really what it came down. We were off by over $1 million on our price, and this was a 72 unit property in Iowa, selling for right around 50K a door. So I mean, we thought we could make it happen. We were trying to do everything we could, but ultimately the sellers weren't budging. So
Right. And that's the thing, right? Your numbers are your numbers. You have a point to where it makes sense and where it doesn't. And that's nothing on the seller. It's just, hey, this is our reality. And hopefully the reality of both the buyer and the seller match or at least get within some range. But sometimes, yeah, you just can't make it work. And that's the interesting thing about going in and finding, hey, management could be better, right? It's not running efficiently, or maybe the tenant base is not as good as you thought it was. Sometimes that's a real opportunity because you can turn that stuff around. It may take some time, but that could be money that you could gain on the other side. But other times it's so bad that the cost up front, the time up front just doesn't make sense to make the deal work.
yeah, I mean, we did everything we could. We started off with a 70-30 split and slowly went migrating closer to an 80-20 split, getting rid of the acquisition fee. And ultimately you just have to draw the line somewhere. And we don't want to lose money in this deal. And it got to the point where we weren't even going to make our money back for the time we were putting into it up front. And the overall return, the average annual return kept going down, the IRR kept going down based on the changes we were making. But yeah, we just couldn't do it. You can't do it. You can't do it.
Yeah, and I think there's some points there for passive investors too. If they're looking at these deals, and if the metrics look too skinny, if it looks like they're really trying to squeeze something out and it's right on the line, then you may want to pay a little more attention to those numbers because they may just be trying to get the deal done, and maybe there isn't as much meat on the bone as there should be. And if, especially like you said, if that sponsor is cutting down all their fees, it's counterintuitive. But to me, that's a red flag as well. Like, you have to get paid, right? And it's because you're doing work. You're putting this deal together. You're doing the due diligence. You're touring the property. You are paying for legal fees. All these things, all these expenses of both real and time, go into putting these deals together. So if an investor has a problem with that person getting paid, then that person probably shouldn't be investing. But also, if they see a deal where the sponsor is cutting down their own fees to a point, like cutting out an acquisition fee altogether, I would question that and be like, hey, it's kind of weird. Like, I'm happy with my returns that you're showing me, but why are you not paying yourself at some point? So I don't know if you share the same opinion.
Absolutely right. And that's something we didn't realize at the time, even. We hadn't even presented this to investors yet. We were newbies in the space. We did have an experienced guy that coming on as AP, but that is absolutely the truth. And we just didn't realize it. We were just trying to make the deal happen, like thinking we were being generous by taking less of a cut to make the deal happen. But yes, it's ultimately not the case. The GPs need to have some skin. They need to have some type of incentive in order to make the deal perform properly. Otherwise, they're not gonna care when things start to go sideways as
Right.
much.
Exactly. It just goes back to alignment of interest, right? And that
Yes.
works both ways, ensuring that the sponsor is getting paid for their efforts and that the investors are getting a fair portion for their money because they're the ones who are taking the biggest risk when it comes to money that they're putting into that deal. All right. So I wanted to hit on one last thing before we go on to the next portion, because you did mention your fund. And if you could just give me a, general overview, because not a lot of the guests that we've had on here have dove into the fund world. So if you could explain, especially for the newer passive investors, what a fund is and how it differs from a regular syndication deal from the passive investor perspective.
So, from the passive investor perspective, the model that we're using really isn't that much different. There's a couple reasons we chose to go this route, and that was ultimately born out of the lessons we've learned in previous deals we've been a part of. The Iowa deal, the Mobile, Alabama deal that we're in. We've realized how competitive this space is, especially now. It becomes more important. The stronger your track record, the stronger the relationships you have with brokers, the confidence the brokers have in an operator's ability to close. Those are the folks that are going to get the best deals. That's just the way it is. And throughout the past few years of going after deals, we learned how it works. And not to be cliche, but as the old saying goes, if you can't beat them, you might as well join them. So that's ultimately why we decided to start a fund. With a fund, we can connect passive investors with the vast network of strong GPs, strong operators, strong teams that are putting together great deals that we just simply don't have access to any other way. So we can still participate in these deals. We have a network of folks who are wanting to become real estate investors, passively invest in deals. So we also have a network of folks that are putting deals together. So we're acting as the connectors between the two. And the only way we can do that is by having a fund. We don't have to participate on the active management team. We have a knowledge base that a lot of folks who are passive investors may not have yet, or who are just getting started in the passive investing space. So we do our homework on these operators, and they have to meet a specific criteria. Once we build up a strong relationship with them, then we'll start receiving deals from them. And if we like the deal, then we'll put it out to our investor base. And the goal is to bring more money together than any one individual would as an LP. The fund acts as an LP, one big LP. And what we're trying to achieve here is more and more we're seeing different class shares for limited partners, of equity partners. So there's class A and class B. A lot of times you'll see whatever the minimum investment is. If it's 50,000 or 100,000, you'll see maybe an 8% preferred return, 80-20 split, something like that. Well, on the other hand, there's a separate class of shares that if you bring, say, 500K or $1 million, then you can get a 9% preferred return and maybe a 70-30 split on the equity side. They're all different, but that's just an example. And so what we're doing is we're making it simpler on the operators. They're not having to find, say, 10 or 20 investors to raise 500K or $1 million. And we're also solving the problem for these W-2 workers, business owners who are fed up with having their money in the stock market and they want to diversify a little bit. So we're connecting the two. And ultimately, there's potential to get a better return through investing in the fund model.
Yeah, and I think that makes a lot of sense, right? There's pluses and minuses to any model. I think the need that you're filling, though, like you said, I hadn't really thought about it from the GP or sponsor side, but absolutely, it's a lot easier to go to someone like you who can bring a larger chunk to the table, vice having 5 investors or 10 investors. But for those passive investors, there's different people who have different needs and different willingness to commit time to this process. We say passive investing, but for people who are participating in this syndication or even with a fund, it's not completely passive. And I say that because they should be doing their own due diligence, right? They should know who this sponsor or fund manager is. They should understand what their expertise is. And then some, like to dive a little deeper and underwrite the deals themselves. Or I've heard of passive investors even wanting to see the properties. Okay, but for the different folks, some may not want to be that involved. Maybe they just want to vet you and they say, hey, John knows what he's talking about. I believe that he's going to be doing this work. He's going to be, pounding the pavement, looking at these deals and vetting these sponsors. And so I'm willing to put my money in with him. even if, like you said, they may get a better rate, but even if that rate is the same or even slightly lower, that time saved may be more valuable to them than the other investor who wants to be more hands on. So, again, it's just filling a different need for different types of investors, which is what this is all about, right? Like passively investing in multifamily in general may not be right for everyone based on their, you know, time horizons, etc., their investing goals. So that's how I see it fitting in. It's, different goals for different people and different priorities.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned it. You hit the nail on the head. You should not be investing. I know it happens, but my opinion on the matter is you should not be investing with somebody if you haven't sat down with them and gotten to know them a little bit. And again, everybody's got different comfort levels with the amount of risk they're willing to take. And my stance on it is I'm out going to these events, I'm out doing the homework, I'm out learning, mingling, learning about who these people really are, asking other people who've invested with them. So that's something that is very hard for people to do who have a very demanding job and maybe they're making good money and they are interested in becoming real estate investors. But yes, you said it, even the passive investing side, it does take a decent amount of homework and time put into it before making the money or before investing the money up front.
Yeah. And we could probably have a conversation about funds for a while since that's an interesting subject in and of itself. But right now, we need to move on to the turbo round. All right. So, John, I'm going to ask you 3 questions in quick succession that I ask all my guests. The first one is, what is the one red flag every investor should look out for? And that could be either a passive or active investor.
I'd say specifically right now, the number one flag you should look out for is adjustable rate mortgages or adjustable rate loans. With the current environment we're dealing with, if you see adjustable rate, you better be extremely confident in a quick business plan, a quick refinance. But my 2 cents on the matter is to avoid it altogether.
Yeah, and it's funny, you're the first person who's mentioned that, but it certainly is timely. Right. So yes, I would say my next question, if they do say it's an adjustable rate, because in commercial, it's more common than I thought it was. I would see these rates and I would just assume that they were set because for so long rates were going only one direction and that was down. So it's like no one even thought about it. They thought it was just as good, to have the adjustable because they only go in one direction, right? But now that is clearly not the case and they've gone up significantly. My next question is, okay, do you have a rate cap? Have you purchased a rate cap? And for those who aren't familiar, because I wasn't familiar with it because it wasn't really a thing until about less than a year ago, it's basically like an insurance policy that says, hey, if my adjustable rate goes above, say 2% what it is right now, then that insurance will kick in and start paying the difference. And I will tell you that on 3 properties that I'm on right now as a GP, we have rate caps on all 3 of them, and we have hit the rate cap for all 3 of them. So it is saving us. And you want to talk about the inflation. The rate cap, I think, on one of them was like $150,000. Sounds like a lot, actually a bargain. Because right now that same rate cap would cost anywhere between $600,000 and $800,000. So it's blowing my mind. This stuff that's happening.
Wild times out there right now.
Exactly. It's just so different than it was, like I said, less than a year ago, which is crazy. And it's certainly affecting deals for sure. All right. What is a myth about this business that you would like to set straight?
A myth that I have learned myself the hard way is that this is not a get-rich-quick scheme. There are ways that you can make money more quickly in this space, but a lot of the people that you see who appear to be having a lot of success, yeah, some of it's legit, but they didn't get there overnight. I set some pretty lofty goals for myself a couple years back, and despite my best efforts, I came nowhere close to hitting them. $10,000 of passive income by this time next year. Well, yeah, that's cool, but it's not really realistic for my situation that my current phase in life that I'm in. So long-term goal, long-term vision is definitely key in this space, and figuring out why you're doing it, that's going to be huge. You got to be in this for the long run, and you got to believe in it. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more because I'm in the same boat. I look at my goals from, 2018, 2019, and I was like, wow, I did terrible on that. But there's things that we can control, and then there's things we can't control, right? So, like you said, it's important to have that long-term vision, but I'd say don't beat yourself up too much if you don't reach those audacious goals, and continue to refine them as often as needed because, like you said, yeah, situations change. I mean, the birth of a child, that changes a lot of things, as you well know. So.
Yes.
All right, final question. What does success look like to you?
Such a good question. It's a hard one for me to answer. I think success is just finding a way to make money doing something you like. And, you reach a certain point where the money's not as important anymore. So I've heard, haven't reached that point yet. But I think once you reach that point in your life, then you got to find something that means a lot to you, that's meaningful for you to do. For me, my ultimate goal, the reason why I'm investing in real estate is so I can have more control, more freedom over my life. And so I can be there with my kids when they're a little bit older, when they're doing the sports or whatever it is that they choose to do with themselves. I just want to be present. I want to be around. I don't want to have to answer to anybody else. I want to be able to travel the world for as long as I want, whenever I want, with whoever I want. And I think that's ultimately what success means to me, just having freedom and control to do what I want and having the money to do it.
Yeah, that freedom of time and money are such key points. And like you said, it's really a hard balance. And I don't even know if balance is the right word, because think of it as balance is not something that's maintained. It's something that you're continually trying to achieve. So how much do you sacrifice now so that you get that time later? Because you don't want to regret the now. And we've talked about this before. So continually trying to check yourself to make sure that you're not leaning too far one way or the other. And then it's tricky when, like you said, different people reach that point of not caring about money as much. I know my wife has probably already reached that point. She's like, why are you working so hard? We're fine. And I was like, yeah, but fine isn't good enough. I don't want complacency to prevent me from reaching my goals either, because it's so easy to get comfortable. And I think that's a really dangerous place. Definitely appreciate what you have and enjoy it. But I don't want to get so comfortable that all of a sudden I'm just like easing into the couch and 3 hours of Netflix later, oh my gosh, what happened? Well, hey, John, this has been great. Please tell our guests how they can get a hold of you and if you have anything else that you would like to share with them.
Yeah, so the best place to get a hold of me is go check out our free guide for passive investing. You can find that at www.passivecreprofits. That's CRE as in commercial real estate. Also, if you're interested, I got a podcast myself. It's called Freedom Investor Radio. Talk about my journey as I seek to replace my W-2 income with income from real estate and talk to other people who are on similar missions. So it's been a pleasure, Tim.
Yeah, and it's a great show. You've had some amazing guests on there. Yeah, I've been on there too, but you
Including
also
yourself.
yeah, but you also have amazing guests. And so, John, appreciate you coming on. Welcome anytime. And I look forward to seeing you do big things on your journey to multifamily millions.
Thanks, Tim. Much appreciated. Enjoyed it.
All right, take care.